In over 4,000 years of galactic history, only 7 story-relevant members of Yoda's species have ever been recorded. They have no known homeworld, no species name, and no explanation for their extraordinary connection to the Force. Yet every recorded member demonstrated extraordinary Force abilities, with most rising to the highest ranks of the Jedi Order. Drawing from both Canon and Legends sources, this is every member of Yoda's species explained. The first and earliest known member of Yoda's species lived nearly 4,000 years before the Empire rose to power. His name was Vandar Tokare, and he served on the Jedi Council during some of the most devastating wars the galaxy had ever seen. In the Legends continuity, Vandar appears in the video game Knights of the Old Republic, set in 3956 BBY. He stood roughly the same height as Yoda, with the same green skin and large pointy ears. Notably, Vandar mostly spoke with normal grammar, though he occasionally used slight inversions without the consistent backwards sentence structure that Yoda would later become famous for, a distinction that becomes important when examining the other members of this species. Vandar served on the Dantooine Jedi Enclave Council during the Mandalorian Wars, when the warrior clans nearly conquered the entire Republic. He watched a promising young Jedi named Revan defy the Council and lead a faction of Jedi to war. That decision saved the Republic, but it also corrupted Revan completely, and the young hero returned as Darth Revan, a Sith Lord who nearly destroyed the very order he once served. Vandar also helped train one of the era's most important Jedi, Bastila Shan. Her rare gift of battle meditation could turn the tide of entire wars by boosting allied morale while crushing the enemy's will to fight. When Revan threatened to overwhelm the Republic with his Sith Armada, Bastila's abilities became the Jedi's greatest weapon, and Vandar recognized her potential and helped nurture it. That training would prove decisive in the war to come. After Revan was captured and his memory erased by the Jedi Council, Vandar helped guide the former Sith Lord back to the light. He was present when Revan discovered the Star Forge, an ancient factory producing endless fleets for the Sith Empire, and he saw Revan make the choice to destroy the Star Forge rather than claim its power. For a brief moment, it seemed the Jedi had won. The victory did not last. 4 years after those events, in 3952 BBY, Jedi Master Atris secretly called a conclave on the planet Katar, hoping to identify the mysterious Sith threat that was systematically hunting Jedi across the galaxy. Vandar attended that gathering, unaware that Atris had deliberately leaked its location, hoping to draw out the enemy. The enemy who came was Darth Nihilus, a being of pure hunger who consumed life through the Force. Nihilus was not a typical Sith Lord because he had become something else entirely, a wound in the Force that fed on living energy. When Nihilus arrived at Katar, he consumed every living thing on the planet's surface, and millions died in an instant. Vandar Tokare, the first recorded member of Yoda's species, perished alongside his fellow Jedi. Only one being survived, a Miracula named Visas Mar, whom Nihilus took as his apprentice. Though Vandar had fallen to the Sith, he would not be the last of his kind to face them. Moving on, the second member of Yoda's species existed approximately 300 years later. His name was Oteg, and he rose to prominence in the Jedi Order around 3643 BBY during the Great Galactic War between the Republic and the resurgent Sith Empire. He served as a Jedi Master and Fleet Admiral, commanding the Republic's first expeditionary fleet from the bridge of the dreadnought Talos. Like Vandar before him, Oteg spoke with completely normal grammar and possessed tremendous wisdom and power. Unlike Vandar, Oteg took direct military action against the Sith. Oteg appears in the video game Star Wars: The Old Republic, where he learned through the Force ghost of Mitra Surik that a powerful Jedi had been held prisoner by the Sith Emperor for over 300 years. That prisoner was Revan himself, the redeemed Jedi who had destroyed the Star Forge centuries earlier. The Sith had captured him and kept him alive through the Force for 3 centuries of torment, and Oteg commanded the Republic fleet in an assault on the Maelstrom prison, a secret Sith facility hidden in a deadly nebula, to free him. The attack succeeded, and Revan was freed, but victory came at a terrible cost. Grand Moff Rikus Kilran's Imperial Fifth Fleet ambushed Oteg's forces, trapping them between Imperial warships and the prison's defenses. Oteg ordered his fleet to buy time for the strike team completing the rescue mission inside the prison, knowing full well what it would cost him. In one possible outcome of the battle, Oteg's flagship was destroyed during the engagement, with the Jedi Master giving his life to ensure the mission's success. Two members of Yoda's species had now given their lives in service to the Jedi. Vandar served on the Dantooine Enclave Council, while Oteg commanded Republic fleets. Both spoke normally, and both died confronting the Sith Empire. A pattern was emerging. These rare beings devoted themselves entirely to the light side of the Force, even when it cost them everything. But evidence suggests another member of this species may have served in an even darker time. The third recorded reference to a member of Yoda's species comes not from historical records, but from stone. In the Valley of the Jedi, on Rousan, among the monuments commemorating the 7th Battle of Rousan in 1000 BBY, stands a statue depicting a small figure with the unmistakable figures of Yoda's kind. The presence of this monument raises questions that have never fully been answered. The 7th Battle of Rousan ended the 1,000-year conflict between the Jedi and the Brotherhood of Darkness. When Lord Khan faced certain defeat, he activated a thought bomb, a devastating Force weapon that destroyed the souls of every Force user caught in its blast radius. Lord Hoth led 99 Jedi into the caves where Khan waited, sacrificing themselves to ensure no Sith escaped. The explosion killed them all, and their spirits were trapped in the Valley of the Jedi, imprisoned between life and death for 1,000 years. The statue's presence among these monuments suggests a member of Yoda's species served in that final battle, though whether they died alongside their fellow Jedi or somehow escaped the thought bomb's effects remains unknown. What we do know is that Yoda himself later possessed knowledge about the valley and its trapped spirits, and he shared this information with other Jedi, including Rousan. Centuries later, that knowledge became critical when the Dark Jedi Jarek sought to absorb the valley's power for himself. Kyle Katarn stopped him, but only because the valley's existence had been preserved in Jedi memory. The unnamed figure in stone stands as a silent testimony to a presence we may never fully understand, but the fourth confirmed member of this species left behind something far more tangible. The fourth member of this species created something that would shape galactic destiny. His name was Minch, and his story appears in Star Wars Tales Issue 16, a Legends comic titled Heart of Darkness. Unlike the previous members, Minch spoke with the same unusual grammar pattern that Yoda would later use, making this the first recorded instance of that distinctive speech style in any member of the species. Minch was a Jedi Knight, assigned by the Council to hunt dark Jedi across the galaxy. In 700 BBY, he served under a Zabrak Jedi Master named Tadai on a mission to the Bafash system, where several dark Jedi had been corrupting Force-sensitive individuals and turning them to darkness. When the Dark Jedi's leader fled toward the Outer Rim, the Jedi gave chase, and the pursuit led to a remote swamp world called Dagobah. Lightning struck Minch's ship as he entered the atmosphere, and the crash landing left him stranded on the planet's surface. Master Tadai ordered him to wait for extraction, but Minch ignored the command. Eager to prove himself, he pursued his target through the dense jungle vegetation until he found the Dark Jedi Master waiting at the entrance to a cave, and the enemy smiled at his arrival. The confrontation that followed would have lasting consequences. The Dark Jedi mocked Minch's small size, calling the young Jedi a child who was weak and full of fear and anger. Minch responded with fury, insisting he was not a child, and the Dark Jedi's smile widened because he had found exactly the weakness he was looking for. The Dark Jedi offered Minch a choice by summoning shadow warriors from the depths of the cave and telling the small Jedi to give in to the dark side, promising to show him what true power really meant. Minch refused, and the battle was joined. Using Force illusions, the Dark Jedi seemed to multiply into hundreds of smaller versions of himself, overwhelming Minch, and the young Jedi struck out desperately with his lightsaber. When Minch recovered, the Dark Jedi lay mortally wounded, but the enemy's final words proved to be a curse rather than a defeat. With his dying breath, the Dark Jedi proclaimed himself the victor, claiming Minch's mind was weak and open, written with fear and anger like a book for anyone to read. He predicted that Minch would one day make a great addition to the Dark Jedi, and then he died, his blood seeping into the cave floor. The narrator of the comic reveals the true significance of this battle. On that fateful day, on that remote planet, the balance of the Force changed forever. A new place of power was created, as the cave where Minch killed the Dark Jedi became saturated with dark side energy. The violence of that confrontation left a permanent stain on the Force. 700 years later, Luke Skywalker would enter that same cave during his training with Yoda. Inside, he would face a vision of Darth Vader, strike down the apparition with his lightsaber, and beneath the mask, he would discover his own face staring back at him. In Legends, the cave Minch created became a major dark side nexus, though canon acknowledges this location but does not identify him as its creator. Either way, it became one of the most important locations in Star Wars history. The very place that would one day test Luke Skywalker was born from a young Jedi's moment of anger 7 centuries earlier. But the 5th member of this species would spend 900 years trying to prevent exactly that kind of fall. The 5th member of this species is Yoda, who was born in 896 BBY, making him the oldest known member of his kind by a significant margin. He trained Jedi for over 800 years, and estimates suggest he taught approximately 20,000 students during his lifetime. He stood 66 centimeters tall and possessed abilities that made him one of the most powerful Force users in galactic history. In Legends, Yoda was considered a master of all lightsaber forms, and he could sense the future with remarkable clarity. He could deflect Force lightning with his bare hands and appear to others through the Force across vast distances. He learned to survive as a Force spirit after death, a secret taught to him by Qui-Gon Jinn, and he passed this knowledge to Obi-Wan Kenobi and eventually to Anakin Skywalker himself. In Legends continuity, the new essential chronology reveals that approximately 200 years before the Battle of Yavin, Yoda sensed something disturbing in the Force. The greatest Jedi Masters felt a murkiness, an uncertainty, a looming sense of dread pointing to the growing power of the dark side. Yoda developed a theory about this gathering darkness, believing it indicated the coming fulfillment of an ancient prophecy about a chosen one who would destroy the Sith forever. Yoda knew he was not that person, understanding that the dark side could only be fully defeated by someone more powerful than any Jedi in the Order's history. So, he would spend centuries waiting for that individual to appear. His greatest failure was also his greatest student. Count Dooku trained under Yoda and became what the Grandmaster called the Order's greatest student and its greatest failure. Dooku possessed incredible talent and sharp intellect, but he also possessed pride, and that pride led him to question the Jedi way. Eventually, he left the Order entirely, and years later, he returned as a Sith Lord serving Darth Sidious. The Clone Wars transformed Yoda from teacher to general, and the change troubled him deeply. Both canon and legend sources show Yoda leading troops into battle while questioning whether the Jedi had lost their way. He commanded Republic forces at the First Battle of Geonosis, defended Kashyyyk alongside the Wookiees, earning the title Defender of the Home Tree, and led 3 clone troopers against hundreds of battle droids on the moon Rugosa, demonstrating that numbers meant nothing against wisdom and the Force. He assigned Anakin Skywalker a Padawan named Ahsoka Tano, hoping the experience would teach Anakin about attachment and loss. When the time came for Ahsoka to go her own way, Anakin would understand that he need not cling so tightly to those he loved. That was the plan, but none of it worked. When Order 66 came, Yoda felt thousands of Jedi die through the Force. He escaped execution on Kashyyyk and returned to Coruscant, where he discovered the horrifying truth about Anakin's fall. The Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover describes Yoda examining the bodies at the Jedi Temple. He found Sindralig, the temple's lightsaber instructor, among the dead. Yoda had trained Dralig himself, and the grief was almost unbearable. But Yoda could not afford to grieve because two Sith Lords now controlled the galaxy, and Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi were among the only Jedi left who could challenge them. Together, they made a decision that would define the next 2 decades. Obi-Wan would face Anakin, now called Darth Vader, while Yoda would confront the Emperor himself. Yoda's duel with Darth Sidious in the Senate chamber revealed the terrible truth about the Jedi Order's failure. The novelization provides Yoda's thoughts during the battle, as the two most powerful Force users in the galaxy clashed with lightsabers first. Yoda actually disarmed Sidious during their blade-to-blade combat, demonstrating his superior skill with a weapon. But Sidious had other tools at his disposal. The Emperor leaped to higher ground and began hurling Senate pods at Yoda with the Force. As massive platforms crashed around him, Yoda had a terrible realization. The Sith had evolved over 1,000 years, becoming masters of manipulation and deception, while the Jedi had spent those same centuries training to fight the last war, preparing for enemies who no longer existed. The Jedi had been fighting the wrong enemy the entire time, and Yoda understood that he had lost before he started. He had lost before he was born. The duel ended in a stalemate when Sidious unleashed Force lightning, and Yoda caught it with his bare hands, redirecting it back toward its source. An explosion of energy blasted both combatants apart. Sidious clung to a railing, while Yoda fell to the Senate floor far below. Clone troopers flooded the chamber, so Yoda escaped into a maintenance tunnel, cutting through conduits and walls to evade pursuit, while using the Force to sprint faster than any human could run. He dropped from the Senate building into the Coruscant night, using his cloak as an improvised airfoil to slow his descent. He fell directly into Bail Organa's waiting speeder, and when the senator asked if Yoda was wounded, the Grandmaster admitted that only his pride had been hurt. Yoda's exile on Dagobah lasted 23 years, and he chose the planet deliberately. In Legends, the darkside cave that Minch had created 7 centuries earlier masked Yoda's presence in the Force. Recent canon material from the anthology From a Certain Point of View, Return of the Jedi, reveals something remarkable. Yoda's light side presence actually kept the dark cave in balance, his energy counteracting the darkness. When Yoda died, the dark side surged across the planet, spreading through the ecosystem like a shadow. During his exile, Yoda renewed his connection to the natural world. He meditated on how the Jedi had lost their way and prepared to train an apprentice who might become a new hope for the galaxy. His hut measured barely over a meter tall, built against an ancient gnarl tree using mud, rock, and bark, and he survived on a vegetarian diet of yarrow seeds, marsh fungi, gimmer bark, and root leaf soup. Yoda trained Luke Skywalker in the ways of the Force during his final years. He lifted Luke's crashed X-Wing using only the Force, demonstrating that size matters not, even though the ship weighed over 12,000 kilograms. He tested Luke in the Darkside Cave, where the young Jedi saw visions of Vader with Luke's own face beneath the mask. When Luke left Dagobah early to save his friends on Cloud City, Yoda feared he would lose another Skywalker to darkness. Luke returned years later to complete his training and found Yoda dying of old age at 900 years. The Ancient Master's final words carried the weight of centuries. He confirmed that Vader was truly Anakin Skywalker, Luke's father, and warned him about the Emperor's power and the seduction of the dark side. He declared that when he was gone, Luke would be the last of the Jedi. Yoda acknowledged that while he was strong with the Force, he was not strong enough to prevent his passing, recognizing that twilight was upon him and that this was simply the way of things and the way of the Force. His final instruction was simple: pass on what you have learned. The Force runs strong in your family. Then, with his last breath, he revealed there was another Skywalker, and his body faded into nothingness as he became one with the Force. The last Grandmaster of the old Jedi Order had completed his journey, but one more member of his species had served alongside him on the Council, and her story had two very different endings. The sixth member of Yoda's species has two very different fates depending on which continuity you follow. Yaddle was born around 509 BBY, making her roughly half Yoda's age. In Legends, she earned the title The One Below during one of the most harrowing experiences any Jedi ever survived. As a young Padawan, Yaddle accompanied her master, Pulvin Kut, on a mission to liberate the planet Dagobah from a warlord named Tulak. The mission went terribly wrong when Tulak's forces ambushed the Jedi over the Koban Gorge. Pulvin Kut let revenge affect his judgment because he had been tracking Tulak for decades after the warlord murdered his family. Surrounded by enemies, Kut left himself open for attack, and he was killed and beheaded, leaving his Padawan alone against dozens of fighters. Tulak captured Yaddle and imprisoned her in an underground chamber, subjecting her to torture and interrogation while demanding to know when more Jedi would arrive. Yaddle refused to break, telling Tulak that only his reign of terror would end. Eventually, Tulak grew tired of his failed attempts and left the planet, forgetting about his prisoner. The people of Dagobah continued sending food down the shaft as a ritual, barely remembering why, and Yaddle remained underground for over 100 years. Her imprisonment became her transformation. During those decades of isolation, Yaddle achieved complete unity with the Force by reliving her late master's lessons over and over until she understood them completely. She learned combat by fighting predators that wandered into her cave, using nothing but a wooden stick, and she became something the Jedi Order had never seen, a Padawan who trained herself to mastery through sheer will and connection to the Force. When an earthquake finally created an opening, Yaddle emerged to find Dagobah devastated by natural disasters. Rather than returning to the Jedi Temple, she stayed and helped the very people who had imprisoned her rebuild their society. She taught their children and brought hope to a world that had forgotten what hope felt like. When Tulak's son, Kalut, returned to claim the planet, Yaddle defeated him with the same wooden stick she had used for a century, and only then did she return to Coruscant. The Jedi Council faced an unusual situation. Yaddle had been a Padawan when she was captured, and she was still technically a Padawan over a century later. Yet she had achieved a mastery of the Force that rivaled anyone in the Order, and she had learned techniques the Council considered too dangerous to teach. Morichiro was one such technique, an ancient and forbidden Jedi combat art that allowed the user to rapidly slow a target's bodily functions to the point of death. The Council restricted it only to a handful of trusted masters, yet Yaddle had mastered it alone in her underground prison. Force Light was even rarer, an ability that followed a Jedi to purge dark side energy from a location or person. Yaddle was the only known Jedi of her time who could wield it, and her century of isolation had given her powers most Jedi would never achieve. The Council proposed elevating her directly to Jedi Master and granting her a seat on the Council itself. Only Yoda objected, citing the break from tradition, but after glimpsing her future in the Force, he relented. Yaddle joined the Council and went on to train dozens of Padawans, including Oppo Rancisis, who later joined her on the Council. In canon continuity, Yaddle's death comes at the hands of Count Dooku. The animated Tales of the Jedi shows Yaddle following Dooku after Qui-Gon Jinn's funeral in 32 BBY. She discovers him meeting with Darth Sidious in secret, finding proof that a Sith Lord controls the galaxy's politics. She could expose everything. Instead of attacking, Yaddle offers Dooku compassion, pleading with him to bring Sidious to justice and assuring him that whatever lies he had been told and whatever he had done, he could make up for it now. Dooku hesitates, and for a moment, redemption seems possible. Then, Sidious orders Dooku to prove his loyalty, and a lightsaber duel erupts. Yaddle fights bravely, matching Dooku's blade with her own. and she uses the Force to lift a massive hangar door that Dooku drops on her, demonstrating her considerable power. But Dooku's attack is relentless, and he strikes her down with his blade while Sidious watches approvingly. In her final moments, Yaddle condemns Dooku's twisted vision, pointing out how many had suffered for what he calls order. Her death completes Dooku's fall to the dark side, and he earns the name Darth Tyrannus. In Legends continuity, Yaddle passes away 6 years later in a very different way. She accompanies Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Padawan Anakin Skywalker on a mission to the planet Mawan in 26 BBY. Their goal is to restore peace to a lawless world, but a villain named Granta Omega has other plans. Omega releases a deadly bioweapon in the city of Natan, and thousands of innocent people will die. Yaddle makes the impossible choice by using the Force to absorb the entire chemical blast into her own body, drawing the deadly substance into herself like a great net woven from the Force. She saves the city, but dies instantly from the effort. Her final act is to speak telepathically to Anakin, encouraging him about his destiny as the Chosen One. Even in death, she was teaching, and even in death, she was thinking of others. One important detail distinguishes Yaddle from Yoda in canon. She speaks with normal grammar. The Tales of the Jedi episode shows Yaddle speaking standard basic without Yoda's distinctive syntax, confirming that Yoda's unusual speech pattern is a personal quirk rather than a trait of their species. Vandar, Oteg, and Yaddle all spoke normally, while only Minch and Yoda used the distinctive backward structure. But the seventh and final known member of this species would prove that their kind could forge entirely new paths. His name is Grogu, and he represents a bridge between two ancient traditions, a child who would ultimately choose family over the Jedi path. Grogu was born in 41 BBY, the same year as Anakin Skywalker. He trained at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant under multiple masters, and Ahsoka Tano later confirmed this during her meeting with him, revealing that he was raised at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, where many masters trained him over the years. He was 50 years old during the events of The Mandalorian, yet his species ages so slowly that he still appeared and behaved like a toddler. Grogu survived Order 66 through circumstances that remained mysterious for years. The Mandalorian Season 3 finally revealed the truth. When clone troopers stormed the Jedi Temple, several Jedi gave their lives defending Grogu by directing his pram into an elevator and shouting to get the youngling to Keller and Beck. A Jedi Master nicknamed the Sabered Hand, Beck was responsible for training younglings at the temple, and he fought through waves of clone troopers with dual lightsabers to reach Grogu. With help from Naboo allies, Beck escaped Coruscant on a Nubian yacht and delivered Grogu to safety. The child spent the following decades hidden, suppressing his Force abilities to avoid detection by the Empire. He buried his traumatic memories so deeply that even he could not access them, and Ahsoka sensed these dark gaps when she communed with him through the Force, finding that his memory became dark and that he seemed lost and alone. The decades in hiding left the young alien emotionally scarred, fearful, and hesitant to use his powers openly. In 9 ABY, Grogu's whereabouts had become known to the Imperial Remnant. Moff Gideon wanted the child's blood for cloning experiments because his high midichlorian count made him invaluable for research. A bounty was placed on Grogu's head, and a Mandalorian bounty hunter named Din Djarin accepted the contract. Djarin found Grogu on the planet Arvala 7 and initially intended to deliver the asset as contracted. When an assassin droid tried to terminate the child, Djarin made a different choice. He protected Grogu, brought the child aboard his ship, and began a journey that would change both their lives. Their travels across the galaxy revealed Grogu's incredible potential. He lifted a charging mudhorn beast using the Force, saving Djarin's life, but collapsing from exhaustion afterward. He healed mortal wounds with a touch, demonstrating a gift for Force healing that is extremely rare and seldom practiced in canon. And he created a protective Force barrier against an incinerator trooper's flames, saving everyone in the room. he also revealed darker instincts. And when he believed Djarin was being threatened during an arm wrestling match with their ally Cara Dune, Grogu force-choked her. Djarin had to physically stop him because the child's protective instincts could turn dangerous when fear took hold. The Mandalorian armorer declared Grogu a foundling and named Djarin his father under Mandalorian custom, calling them a clan of two. She also gave Djarin a quest: return the child to his own kind, or raise him as a Mandalorian. Ahsoka Tano sensed something troubling when she communed with Grogu through the Force, recognizing his species immediately since she had only known one other being like this, a wise Jedi Master named Yoda. She learned his name and his history at the Jedi Temple, and she also sensed his powerful attachment to Din Djarin, an attachment born of both love and fear. Ahsoka refused to train him, warning that his emotional bonds could lead him to the dark side. She had seen her own master fall to darkness, and she would not risk creating another. She directed them to Tython, an ancient Jedi world where Grogu could reach out through the Force to find another teacher. Luke Skywalker answered Grogu's call. The son of Anakin Skywalker arrived aboard Moff Gideon's cruiser, cutting through an army of dark troopers to rescue the child. In a moment that echoed across generations, Grogu left with Luke to train at his new Jedi Academy. For a time, it seemed Grogu would follow the traditional Jedi path. Luke found that teaching him was unique because it was more like Grogu was remembering than Luke was actually teaching him anything. Years of training already existed within Grogu, buried beneath trauma and fear, and Luke helped him recover those skills. He taught him to leap with the Force, to balance, to focus, and he used the Force to lift frogs, inspiring Grogu to lift one himself, though mainly because he wanted to eat it. But Luke also sensed conflict because Grogu missed Din Djarin. He gazed off into the distance, thinking of his Mandalorian father, and when Luke helped Grogu remember Order 66, the child relived the horror of watching Jedi fall to protect him. His attachment to Djarin made sense because the Mandalorian was the first person to protect him since that terrible night. Luke offered Grogu a choice with two items before him: Yoda's lightsaber and the Beskar chainmail Din Djarin had sent as a gift. Although earlier canon sources stated Yoda's lightsaber was destroyed during an Imperial ceremony, the Book of Boba Fett depicts Luke offering Grogu a green lightsaber identified as Yoda's. The lightsaber meant continuing Jedi training, while the armor meant returning to his Mandalorian family. Grogu could choose only one. Grogu chose Din Djarin. He returned to his father's side and has remained there ever since. In The Mandalorian Season 3, Grogu participates in Mandalorian combat training, uses the acrobatic skills Luke taught him to defeat a fellow foundling in a friendly match by executing 3 impressive flips before tagging his opponent. He saves Din from danger multiple times, demonstrating growing control over his abilities. And when Moff Gideon attacks the Mandalorian covert, Grogu creates a force barrier that shields Din and Bo-Katan Kryze from the explosion as the cruiser crashes. The season ends with Din Djarin formally adopting Grogu as his son. The armorer pronounces Grogu an apprentice of Clan Mudhorn, giving him the name Din Grogu. Because he cannot yet speak, he cannot take the full Mandalorian oath, but his place among the Mandalorians is secure. He will grow up following the way of the Mandalore while carrying the Force abilities trained by Luke Skywalker himself. The species of Yoda remains a mystery to this day, with no homeworld ever identified and no population beyond these 7 individuals ever recorded.